Hey y'all, it's Mary again. I had a great idea, or what I thought was a great idea, for a video this afternoon while I was at work, and I had to get home so I could take a video of it because I could not wait to talk about it. So, what I'm going to talk about today is actually book quotes because when I first started writing reviews, I wasn't looking actively for quotes I really enjoyed in the book, but there would be lines that I really enjoyed and be like, oh, this is a great line, or oh, I like this part. And I would sort of talk about it in the review, but I would never actually physically write the quote in the review. And other people would do that. So I thought maybe that'd be a really good way to do it, pull out some really cool quotes. Of course, now you kind of get into the how spoilery are quotes really. Um, so I was a little on the fence about that. So I started including them in the reviews. And so I really like including quotes in reviews, but I haven't done it in my last couple. Mostly because sometimes a line doesn't really just stand out to me, or I just forget to do it, or some other reason. One of the things I do try and do is I keep a little book called Today is a New Day, and this is where it keeps all my quotes that I find. So, for example, when I was reading, let's find The Grace Year, and I wrote down, but all you have to do is open your eyes. My eyes are wide open. I really liked that one. I also have Warrior of the Wild. No one ever did like being second best. And then, of course, I've got an Enchantment of Ravens. All in all, it was a disarming quality for a creature who could murder me without rescheduling his tea. So I have this full book of quotes, and sometimes I have quotes from books I don't finish. For example, Markswoman. I wasn't really into the writing style, so I didn't finish that one. But I do have a quote in here. And so I have a whole bunch of stuff. Sometimes just like bits and pieces, not full quotes, but general thoughts and ideas. Including books I didn't enjoy. I have quotes from them as well. Because sometimes there are bits and parts of the book that you do like. So, you have like Blood Air, which I had quite a few quotes from. Blood trickled down her arm in a lover's spiral, vivid crimson against the dusky olive of her skin. I really liked some of the quotes in that book. I thought they were really beautiful. One of my favorite quotes actually is from Ember Queen, which is, "My friends have me, and so I am safe." I really liked that quote. Well, I liked that whole series, in fact. I think that the Ash Princess trilogy is one of my favorites. It's got some really good moments in there. Grave Maidens, what kind of sister would I be if I didn't try? And you may remember I do love sisterly relationships and sisterhood in books. Also, Blood Countess, a siren offering me her hands. Apparently, I have been on the siren kick because I seem to read a lot of those books. So those are some of the ones I have in here. Especially for physical books, I write them down because I remember them more. When I'm reading an ebook, if I'm lucky and it's Kindle, I take notes through the Kindle. And so I like to track what I'm reading that way. And it's a little bit easier, I think, doing it on Kindle. So I have a hate-love relationship. It's so easy for me to look up my notes on here. But I like having physical books. The idea of collecting them, having them on my shelf, makes me very happy. So I don't like that in terms of Kindle books. Because then you can't see them, you can't enjoy them, but they're on there easy. So, funny story, there's only one book series I own multiple copies of all the books, is The Raven Cycle. I actually own the entire edition on my Kindle, and I actually own the entire physical series, because I bought it on the Kindle before I really started collecting books. But I liked this series enough that I wanted to own it. And so I ended up doing that, and then I realized I wanted to buy them, so I bought them. One of the only other series that I have that is like Throne of Glass with my collector's edition of the first book. So I really kind of liked that. So I mostly mark at the beginning of the book, apparently. I tend to stop looking for quotes probably about halfway. I just drop off and I never finish looking at them. So the two I remember to get for the bone season is we live in a way you might consider normal, provided you don't look too hard. And so we became more hated. We made the stories true. I really liked both those quotes, and there were some really good things in that whole series that I really liked. And so that's what I kind of do with quotes, and I've stopped putting them in my reviews again, and I'm not quite sure why. But I do like them. I like reading them in reviews, because sometimes it gives you an idea of the author's writing style. Because quotes can say a lot about a book, especially the tone, the wording, it just, and sometimes it's deceptive, because sometimes it isn't the same. I really enjoy pulling quotes out for that reason. I just have a horrible track record with keeping track of them and actually using them in my reviews. And I wish I were better at it, but unfortunately I am not. So we're just going to do our best to forgive me for that, because it's one thing I'm not great at. And I think that's partially because I try and write detailed reviews, but sometimes I feel like I'm not writing detailed enough. And other times I feel like I'm writing too much, because how long are you really going to sit and read a review? And that's the main thing. How much patience do you have? How much patience do I have on a normal basis? So I try and write a review and kind of divide it up about how long I spend reading a review. And I'm a fairly fast reader. So reading reviews doesn't take me nearly as long, but I feel there's something more, you're using more brain power to decipher the review than you are if you're reading a book sometimes, because you're reading what somebody else is writing about someone else's work. And so you're trying to parse how much of this is personal opinion and how much of it is something else, and you're trying to think about it. So I sometimes really like reading reviews that are negative, especially negative about my favorite books, because it gives me a different insight, gives me a different look at what I might be missing. I actually find it really helpful. I especially find it helpful reading reviews for books I'm not sure about, negative and positive, because sometimes a positive is something I really, really hate in a book that somebody else loves, and something I love somebody else hates. And so I find I get a lot of good feedback from reviews in regards to that when I'm looking at positive and negatives. So mixed reviews are, for me, really useful. I know a lot of people think 3-star reviews are bad. In my opinion, they're good. 3-star reviews mean you enjoyed the book, that you liked the book. And so a lot of the books I rate 3 stars does not mean they are bad books. They are not. It is just, I just didn't enjoy them to the level of really liking them or loving them, like 4 or 5-star ratings. So when I rate a book, I do my very, very best to try and be honest. That's why I like half stars, because it really helps. Like, is it 3 or is it 3.5? I might go with the 3.5. So regarding that is why I find it so important to find good reviewers and people who like reviewing and who don't just write one sentence. Not that there's anything wrong with writing one sentence if you don't have a lot to say. I do it all the time. If I DNF a book, I write like 1 or 2 sentences, or like one, or just DNF, because it just wasn't working for me. But I'm talking about in-depth reviews to see if I'm going to like a book. I need more than a sentence. I need a paragraph at least to kind of get an idea of what the book is about, what people liked and what they didn't like. One other thing I really like about reading other reviews is that it's given me kind of an idea of what people like to see and what other people are looking at. I tend to divide mine up into review or the beginning thoughts, like what I thought about when I was getting into this book beforehand, some overall thoughts. And then I get into the writing. The writing is really the base of the book for me. If I'm not enjoying the writing, I'm probably not going to enjoy the book. And 90% of the time, the writing is why I don't finish a book. The writing is the biggest thing for me, because if I'm not enjoying the writing, I'm probably not going to finish the book. And then I've got pacing. Pacing is secondary to the writing for me. If a book is taking really long time for me to get into it, and I like slow books. I really, really, really love slow books. Like Catherine Arden's work is great, and hers is like really slow build. But if it's slow and I feel like there's no character development, there's no plot, there's no point, and they're just kind of like going to parties and there's no point to the parties, and it's, I don't know. So sometimes it just feels like the pacing is not working for me, like whether it's going way too fast, way too slow, and there's no consistency between the plot and the writing. That's probably going to be a DNF for me. And sometimes I'll try and push through, and then sometimes I won't. It just kind of depends on how invested I am. And that kind of leads me to the third thing, which is the plot. And so I find the plot is another big part. And so when I write about the plot, sometimes I mix plot and characters together in parts, because if the book is character-driven plot, you're going to get more characterization than you might be getting actual plot. But if something is more action-based, you might be getting a little bit less characterization. So it's a bit of a trade-off. So plot and characters are kind of interchangeable, but those are the next two in the list that I talk about. I like both. I really enjoy character-driven stories if I'm in the mood for them. And sometimes I really enjoy action, but I have to be in the mood. And so sometimes I'll DNF a book and then go back to it later and read it. So then we move on to the final bit, which is world building, if there is. And so I only use world building if it's going to be fantasy or really urban fantasy or sci-fi or something that is not contemporary. I don't find it necessary in contemporary because there's a little bit less world building going on in that. But I really like using it for fantasy and others, as it gives you a good idea. So those are the main ones. And then I have one that's either overall or my thoughts. And those are kind of like my overall thinking about the book after I've written the review, and kind of summarizing and wrapping everything up. And that's fun. That's enjoyable for me to write, because I kind of get to talk about everything all together at once instead of it all being all separate in different parts. And so that's kind of what I do. And then I put the rating, and I just kind of write between 0 stars and 5 stars. That's what seems to be working for me right now, because if I drop it down into little bite-sized chunks, I feel it's a lot more manageable than one endlessly long review like I used to do. And everybody's different, but that seems to be what's working best for me at the moment, and that's probably what I'll keep doing. Like, I guess the best example, one of the things I'm talking about, is Sarah J. Maas's new book, House of Earth and Blood, I think. Other knows Crescent City. It's going to get really confusing when the second book in that series comes out and we're still calling the first one Crescent City. So, anyways, that book was slow. Like, the first 200 pages, I almost quit reading it. But I remembered how good the rest of her books got after the beginning. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to keep reading because I trust this author enough to keep going. And it did get better after the first 200 pages. I was still not into it by about page 500, 600. I was still going, okay, it's okay. I like it. It's okay. Probably might not buy it. I bought it because the last 200 pages or so made the whole book worth it. It really did. So, but that's what I'm talking about when I say slow paced books, and then pacing can be an issue, especially if you're not getting me in that first half. All the Stars and Teeth did the same thing to me. I really liked that book. It was a 5-star read for me. But the first chapter was good. And then you get like 2, 3, and 4, which are really slow. They're really boring. And I really didn't love those chapters. But they added stuff to the book, and so they were necessary. And then you get to chapter 5 and it picks up and you're like, oh my god, this book is amazing. This is great. I hope people didn't give up on that book because of that. Because the book really is great. It's just, unfortunately, the pacing wasn't perfect in that one. But I loved it. It was a 5-star read for me overall. And so that's why I like giving books second chances, because sometimes it's all about the mood, especially for me as a reviewer. If I'm not in the mood to read something, I could DNF it. I could give it 1 or 2 stars and then go back a year later, 6 months later, and think it's a 5-star read. There is no in between for me. So sometimes it's about finding the perfect moment to read it and therefore enjoy it. I know I started this video talking about quotes, but I did want to talk about reviews as well, because I think they're so important. So this is my little bit of my rant about my reviews and about reviews in general. So this is my video about reviews and quotes and everything else to do with how I do reviews, and I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about. So let me know what you guys like doing about reviews and how you review, and what you like seeing and what you don't like seeing, and things you think you want to work on in your reviews.